Alan laughed at something our daughter said, then leaned back and told the table, "We're doing just fine, just the two of us." Everyone chuckled. No one noticed me sitting right there. In that moment, I realized I wasn't a wife or a mother anymore. I was nothing, just background noise. My name is Celestia Monroe. The laughter around the table didn't include me. Glasses clinked, forks scraped plates, and the conversation rolled on without a pause, as though the chair I occupied were empty. Alan spoke with ease, spinning a story about their plans for the next year, his cases at the firm, Ava's future, the trips they might take together. His voice was animated, confident, the kind of tone people lean toward because it makes them feel part of something. I sat inches away, and yet I wasn't part of anything at all. Ava giggled at his remarks, her eyes sparkling in his direction. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and chimed in about a course she wanted to take, turning to her father for approval, never once glancing across the table. The way she smiled at him, warm, familiar, secure, was a smile I hadn't seen aimed at me in a long time. My words felt lodged somewhere in my throat, unspoken, unnecessary. The others didn't notice the silence. They kept listening, nodding, feeding on Alan's energy, as if our family picture was flawless. I held my knife and fork, but the food tasted flat, as though my presence had stripped flavor from it. The more they spoke, the more I shrank into the background until I was little more than a shadow at the edge of my own table. And then came the line, casual, tossed out like an afterthought, yet sharp enough to slice me open. "We're doing just fine, just the two of us." Ava's laughter rang out again. Heat rushed to my face, but no one looked at me. At that table, in that house, I was no longer wife or mother. I was nothing at all. I tried to hold on, to believe that what I felt was only a rough patch, but the distance between us widened like a crack spreading through glass. Alan grew more elusive with every passing week, phone pressed to his ear late at night, whispering into the dark as though the sound of my footsteps in the hallway might shatter something he was constructing. His briefcase always seemed heavier when he came home, yet his gaze lighter, drifting past me as if I were just another piece of furniture. I told myself to stop imagining things, but the numbers refused to lie. The joint account I managed for years began to bleed out, withdrawals appearing in neat, steady lines. Each one was small enough to be dismissed, but together they drained months of savings. When I asked casually if he'd noticed the balance, Alan only muttered something about expenses and turned back to his phone. Then Ava came to the kitchen, clutching papers for a scholarship application. I reached for them instinctively, ready to help, but she pulled back and shook her head with a little laugh. "Dad handles everything now." She didn't even hear the silence that followed. My hand hovered in midair, empty, as she skipped off toward his office. That moment cut deeper than any number on a bank statement. It wasn't just money slipping through my fingers. It was the role I once held, the bond I thought could never be replaced. I stood alone in that room, realizing with a sinking certainty that I no longer belonged to the center of this family. I was orbiting outside of it, unseen and unnecessary. One evening, Alan's shower hummed upstairs while I passed his study. The door left slightly ajar. His briefcase sat on the desk, unlocked, the flap carelessly tilted open. For years I had respected boundaries, but something pulled me closer. The corner of a paper peeked out, crisp and deliberate, as if waiting for me. My fingers trembled when I slid it free. At the top, bold type spelled it out. Petition for dissolution of marriage. His signature was already scrawled across the bottom, dated days earlier. A yellow sticky note clung above the line where mine should go. 3 words, nothing more. Sign and return. The air seemed to thicken, pressing against my chest as I rifled further. Letters addressed to Ava's university spilled out, polite but poisonous. Alan had written of a wife, unstable, struggling mentally, unable to provide a steady environment. He painted himself as the dependable parent holding everything together. The pages blurred as I stared, my pulse hammering in my ears. The cold silence at dinners, the empty account, Ava's sudden distance, it had all been orchestrated, piece by piece. This wasn't neglect, wasn't a marriage slipping through tired hands. It was a blueprint, a strategy to erase me, not just from a household, but from every record that proved I ever mattered. And in that instant, shock turned into something heavier, sharper. I understood with chilling clarity. The man I lived beside wasn't simply pulling away. He was preparing to erase me entirely. The house felt colder after I placed those papers back into Alan's briefcase. Every corner carried the weight of a trap. Every shadow a reminder that I was no longer safe in my own home. I moved quietly through the bedroom, pulling an old duffel from the closet. I didn't pack much, just clothes enough for a few days, my laptop, and the framed picture of Ava as a little girl. Her smile in that photo, gap-toothed and unguarded, was the last pure memory of the child who once needed me. I slipped out without a word. The night pressed close as I drove north, the highway stretching into silence, broken only by the hum of tires. Boston's lights fell away behind me, until only the dark woods of New England surrounded me. By the time I pulled into the small town where I'd grown up, the first hint of dawn was softening the horizon. My parents' porch light was still burning, a stubborn habit of my father's. When the door opened, I saw surprise in their faces, quickly washed away by worry and then recognition. My father said my name, not the flat version Alan used when speaking to others, but my name, whole and real. He set a hand on my shoulder, steady and warm, and I broke apart. Tears came fast and unashamed, because for the first time in years I was truly seen. But the relief was brief. When I checked my accounts later that morning, every cent had vanished. Alan had drained the savings, closed the credit cards, and left nothing in my name. I stared at the screen, the numbers replaced by zeros, realizing this was never about ending a marriage. It was about stripping me bare, financially, emotionally, completely. The divorce wasn't just separation, it was erasure. Life at my parents' house moved slowly, filled with ordinary routines that should have been comforting. My mother made breakfast with the same care she had when I was a child, and the garden outside bloomed despite the late chill. I tried to settle into this quieter rhythm, but the silence of my phone was constant, a hollow ache that no meal or morning sun could cure. Then, one afternoon, the silence broke. A message lit up the screen. Ava. My heart leapt, foolishly hoping for warmth, some spark of the girl who once curled against me, asking for another bedtime story. Instead, the words cut deeper than any betrayal I'd imagined. Just sign the papers. Mom, don't ruin my scholarship because of your issues. I read it again and again, the tone sharp, distant, like a stranger addressing an inconvenience. My hand shook, holding the phone, but the real fracture was in my chest. She didn't doubt, didn't question. She believed him. She believed I was unstable, the obstacle in her path, the reason her future might crumble. It hit me with cruel clarity. Alan hadn't just stolen our money or twisted legal papers. He'd stolen my daughter's trust, and if I signed, if I surrendered, I would vanish entirely from her life, erased not only on paper but in her heart. I set the phone down, my pulse hammering. This wasn't only a war against Alan's lies, it was a fight for Ava, the last tie that bound me to the life I had built. Losing her would mean losing everything. The dining table at my parents' house, scarred by decades of meals and family arguments, became something else entirely, a war desk. Julian spread out the papers I had carried with me, lining them up with the precision of a teacher preparing a lesson. His pen tapped against the wood before he uncapped a red marker and began to draw lines, circling dates and numbers that on their own seemed ordinary, but together spelled out something calculated. 8 months ago, he said, dragging a red stroke across the page, he started siphoning money out, small withdrawals so the bank wouldn't flag them. Another line cut through an email dated 6 months back, where Alan painted me as unstable to Ava's university. Julian's jaw tightened as he underlined the words. Finally, His pen slammed against the petition for divorce, time-stamped 3 months earlier. That's when he decided you no longer existed. My father leaned forward, glasses perched low, scrutinizing the statements with a precision that reminded me of his old engineer's mind. He kept the amounts under the reporting threshold. He knew exactly what he was doing. My mother, quiet until then, set her hand over mine, her eyes heavy with sorrow. I felt a hollowness spread inside me. This wasn't abandonment, it was strategy. Every cold glance, every silence, every vanishing dollar had been placed like bricks in a wall designed to shut me out. Julian didn't soften the blow. He never wanted a divorce. He wanted you erased, no money, no dignity, and no Ava. His words fell like a verdict, and for the first time I realized the scope of Alan's cruelty. I wasn't fighting to save a marriage. I was fighting for the right to still exist. I met Naomi at a small cafe tucked between the post office and the library, a place that smelled of cinnamon and old wood. We hadn't seen each other in years, but the way she clasped my hands told me she already understood. She read through the stack of documents without a word, her sharp lawyer's eyes darting from page to page. When she finally spoke, her tone was blunt, almost surgical. If you go to court now, you lose. He staged this perfectly. Financial records, false testimony, even Ava's perception of you. He'll get the house, the accounts, and very likely custody. You'll walk away with nothing but the clothes on your back. The words stung, but I couldn't argue. Naomi leaned closer. The only strategy left is retreat. Let him believe he's won. Build yourself quietly. Steady job, education, allies. When you're ready, you'll have ground to stand on. Until then, fighting is suicide. The thought of yielding sickened me. My fists clenched, ready to reject her advice. But then my phone buzzed. Ava's name. I answered with trembling hands. Her voice came hollow, rehearsed. You're ruining my future. Just sign the papers. And then, faint but unmistakable, Alan's baritone feeding her the words in the background. The line went dead. I sat frozen, the cafe spinning around me. Naomi's hand closed over mine again, firmer this time. Sometimes the only way to win is to let them think you've already lost. I left the cafe with my heart torn, but clarity rising through the pain. I would not sign. I would not fight on his terms. I would vanish from his battlefield, only to return stronger. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting, I was choosing, and that choice meant survival. 5 years passed like a slow, deliberate climb out of darkness. New Hampshire became more than a refuge. It became the soil where I replanted myself. The small library at the university offered me stability, and in its quiet stacks, I rebuilt my sense of worth, one page at a time. Nights once filled with dread turned into hours of study, and eventually, a diploma. I held my master's degree in my hands, not as proof for Alan or anyone else, but as evidence that I had survived and created something new from ruins. The women of Aurora Circle became my companions in that journey. Around kitchen tables, in borrowed church basements, and during long walks along the river, we stitched together our broken stories. Each of us carried scars, but together they became less like wounds and more like maps. They pushed me to laugh again, to believe in resilience, to remember that what had been stolen from me could be replaced with something I chose for myself. I filled my days with small rituals, reading in the garden until the sun warmed my shoulders, joining a yoga class that taught me how to breathe in ways I'd forgotten, and dusting off old hobbies left behind during years of silence. Slowly, the reflection in the mirror stopped looking like a ghost of someone erased and started resembling a woman who belonged wholly to herself. Then, one soft spring evening, as the lilacs outside my window opened, the phone rang. His voice slid through the line, familiar yet unwelcome. "Ava's getting married," Alan said, almost too casually. "She misses you. You should come." The words landed like stones in my chest, heavy and sharp. 5 years of silence. 5 years where he let me vanish from her milestones, her birthdays, her ordinary days, And now this? The invitation wasn't kindness. It was a test, or perhaps a trap. But beneath the shock, something steadier rose inside me. This was my moment. The chance not to beg, not to explain, but to stand where he had once sworn I never would. Visible, undeniable. The past had buried me, but this was no longer about survival. It was about presence, and at my daughter's wedding, in the very place Alan had tried to erase me, I would prove I was still here. The country club gleamed like a monument to wealth, perched above the restless ocean in Newport. Rows of luxury cars lined the drive, their polished chrome catching the spring sun. White roses spilled from towering vases, satin ribbons curled along the railings, every detail curated to whisper perfection. I walked through the entrance without hesitation, the click of my heels steady against marble, my navy dress simple yet refined. I chose a seat in the back row, where shadows met the aisle. From there, I could watch everything without demanding it. The music swelled, and heads turned toward the open doors. Ava appeared, radiant in her gown, her arm looped through Alan's. For a brief second, I almost forgot the years between us. The child she once was flashed in my mind, clutching her teddy bear, tugging my sleeve for another story. But that image shattered the moment her eyes swept the room and collided with mine. She faltered mid-step, her smile wavering. Alan stiffened beside her. His hand, meant to steady his daughter, betrayed him instead. It trembled, a visible shudder that rippled up his arm. His jaw tightened, color drained from his face, and though he pressed forward, every guest seated close enough saw it. Whispers trickled through the room, subtle glances darting back toward where I sat. The mask he had worn for years cracked under the simplest act, my presence. The ceremony continued, but the illusion was broken. I didn't need to speak. I didn't need to accuse. By existing in that space, by refusing to vanish as he had scripted, I unraveled the story Alan had spent half a decade perfecting. He had told a world that I was gone, unfit, erased, yet here I was, silent proof of his lies. When the vows ended and the applause swelled, I slipped from the crowd. I didn't linger for photos or toasts. The air outside was cooler, filled with the salt of the ocean. I was halfway to my car when I heard hurried steps behind me. "Celestia, wait!" His voice carried panic. Alan came into view, his face slick with sweat, though the evening was mild. He tried for composure, but his breath betrayed him. "Things got out of control," he said, as if chaos, not calculation, had ruled his hand. I turned to face him fully, my expression steady. "No, Alan, they didn't." My voice was quiet, but it cut through the night. Every lie, every transfer, every silence, you calculated them all. For a moment, he just stood there, his mouth opening without words. His hand twitched again, the tremor running unchecked. He looked at me as though seeing the one flaw in a design he believed was perfect. And for the first time, I didn't feel erased. I felt undeniable. The sun was already sinking when I drove away from Newport, the ocean reflecting streaks of pink and gold. Behind me, the country club glowed with music and laughter, but none of it followed me. No one tried to stop me. No one called my name. I didn't need an apology, or reconciliation, or a final word. My leaving was enough. That night, the silence of my apartment was warm rather than heavy. I set my phone on the table, not expecting anything, when the screen lit. A single message from Ava. "Why did you come today?" I stared at it for a long time, my heart twisting. A dozen replies ran through my mind. Explanations, pleas, accusations, but I erased them all. At last, I typed the only truth that mattered. "Because you're still my daughter." There was no answer. I didn't wait for one. The message wasn't about her response. It was about mine. It was about saying that even after everything stolen, manipulated, and broken, the bond between us wasn't something Alan could rewrite. I set the phone aside and carried my simple dinner to the table. Outside the window, the last light of day poured in. brushing across my face in hues of amber. I ate slowly, without rush, savoring the quiet, savoring the peace. I realized then that revenge had never been about destroying him. It was about building something he could never touch. My life, my freedom, my presence. That was the victory. And no matter how hard he had tried to erase me, I was still here, unshaken, whole,